Welcome to Bay Sunday. I'm Michelle Griego, filling in for Frank Malico this week. If you have a show idea, we would love to hear from you. Just go to KPIX.com, click on the KPIX5 logo, and then scroll down to Bay Sunday. You can connect with us via Facebook and see archive shows too. And today's shows, it brings us a couple of nonprofits and also a couple of book authors. And first up, most of you remember the horrific murder of Matthew Shephard in Wyoming back in 1998. The national media covered it and the trial of the men convicted of Matt's murder as a hate crime. Our first guest is an investigative journalist who spent 13 years traveling to 20 states and interviewed more than 100 witnesses about this murder. And he's here to talk about the results of his investigation and also his book, The Book of Matt, Hidden Truths About the Murder of Matthew Shephard. Please welcome Stephen Jimenez. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's a great pleasure, Michelle.
I have to tell you, I read this book. I couldn't put it down. Fascinating.
Thank you.
What compelled you to investigate? This was 13 years of your life.
I never knew it would be 13 years when I started out. I went to Laramie in early 2000 to write a screenplay about the murder, about the story that we all believed, and it was really about 8 months into working on that screenplay that I learned there was a whole other story there, and so I started to investigate as a journalist, and it took me on a long and winding road.
Well, you went to Laramie thinking that this was a hate crime.
Yes, absolutely.
And you found something else out.
I did. And what really happened is early on, I met the prosecutor in the case, Cal Raruca, and really asked him to educate me about the case, and very gradually started to come on information that suggested that this was a much more complicated crime than any of us understood at the time.
And it was about this, you know, let's just talk about a little bit about that. It wasn't so much of a hate crime, but it was centered around drugs.
It was centered around the drug methamphetamine, which at the time really was not being reported on nationally. Remember, this is 15 years ago. In 1998, meth was already becoming a very big problem in Wyoming and in other states in the Midwest and the West. But it really wasn't being discussed, and at the very same time, it was also starting to become a serious problem in the gay community in urban gay enclaves. And it wasn't until 5-6 years after Matthew's murder that people really began to look seriously at this problem, and the national media began to report on it.
Why did it take so long? Because I remember in 1998, when he was killed, so viciously killed, he was left at a fence for, what, 18 hours? He was tied to a fence, 18 hours, he died 5 days later. We all remember that, and there was so much national media attention on this, and it was considered a hate crime. Why did we hear about drugs then?
Well, I think one reason, Michelle, is that very quickly all the records in the case were sealed by the court, and all the witnesses were placed under a gag order, and that went on for 1 year, from shortly after the crime until after the principal perpetrator, Aaron McKinney, was convicted and sent away for 2 life sentences. It wasn't until after that time period, and that's when I went to Laramie, that the records were really available, and by that point, journalists thought the story was over and weren't really digging or looking.
And of course, we're saying it was characterized as a hate crime because Matthew Shephard, he was openly gay, and you are a gay man as well.
Yes, I am.
So did you feel the connection in that way?
Well, I did. That's originally why I went to Laramie, is to write the story of the hate crime. As a movie, I thought it was really important to tell the story in a long form, because I thought it was really important. And I still think, I mean, this was a horribly violent crime. Nothing takes away from that. But I do believe the complexities, it's worth us understanding the complexities if we're serious about preventing crimes like this from happening in the future. And I don't think at the time the public was aware of the many negative aspects of methamphetamine, that it can cause psychotic episodes, psychotic violence, hallucinations. You know, we now understand what meth psychosis is, meth-induced psychosis, meth rage. I think, you know, the TV series Breaking Bad did a huge amount in terms of educating the public, but that series began 5 years ago.
When you were investigating, you were writing this book, and over the course of 13 years you were doing this, you interviewed McKinney and also Russell Henderson,
yes,
the 2 men convicted of this horrible murder. You interviewed Matthew's friends. You
yes,
interviewed a lot of people. Were you surprised that people opened up to you?
Well, you know, Michelle, it really took time to get to know people. In fact, even with McKinney and Henderson, I first got to know McKinney's father, and then eventually he persuaded McKinney to talk with me. Russell Henderson, I got to know his grandmother. Matthew's friends, the same thing. Initially, people were very reluctant to talk, but over time, as they got to know me and realized that what I was really looking for is to find out and understand what the truths, then people began to open up, and that included law enforcement people. As I mentioned, the prosecutor, one of the lead homicide detectives on the case, a lot of people in town. At the beginning, you know, I would hear rumors that there was more to it than anyone believed, but it really took time to build relationships where people trusted me, because after the way Laramie was characterized as the hate crime capital of the country, people were very, very reticent about the media.
Did you, you know, I thought it was very interesting, well, one, that you talked to, you were able to talk to McKinney in prison, but there was one point where he cut off communication with you.
That's right. Well, it actually really took some time, because initially when I began communicating with McKinney, they were phone interviews, because in Wyoming, you're not allowed to do face-to-face interviews with inmates, but when McKinney and Henderson were moved to Nevada, that's when I was able to see him face to face. He cut off communication with me after I produced a 1-hour story for ABC News 2020 back in 2004 because he felt that I had gone into some of his you know, sex life, which he had kept secret. Aaron McKinney is bisexual, and it was something that really wasn't understood at the time, and he was part of fabricating the story of gay panic, that Matthew had come on to him sexually, and that's what caused him to explode. But
in fact, what you touch on in your book, and I wish we had more time to talk about it, is that they knew each other. They had somewhat of a relationship before the murder.
Yes, Aaron McKinney and Matthew Shephard knew each other for months before the crime happened and were friends, and that's something that was never explored originally.
All right, well, Stephen Jimenez, great book, fascinating. Thank you so much, and good luck on your tour.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate being here. Happy New Year.
Yes, to you too. The Book of Matt, Hidden Truths About the Murder of Matthew Shephard, is available at your local bookstore, also online, and you can see the author, Stephen Jimenez, at the San Francisco Public Library on January 21st. More information is on Facebook, and we will be back with more Bay Sunday coming up after the break.